that gardening is dead simple. So this might be one of these video posts where you're like, I thought you said it was simple and now you're giving me a million different detailed, different rules that I have to follow. And it is true, watering is one of those things that, you know, it's got a lot of tips and exceptions, but they all sort of make sense. So I'm going to explain the rationale behind each one, and I'm going to organize this like a Dave Letterman top 10 list so that you just go in your head and then hopefully you'll remember some of them. And remember, nature is very forgiving, so don't stress too much. So number one, Dave Letterman's number one rule is, I've written them down, whenever you transplant a plant into the ground from out of the pot, you want to water it in well, okay? So basically, the idea is that you're just giving the transplant its new home. Those roots have to find their new place and a new system, and if there are air pockets right around the roots, they can't actually access all of the minerals and nutrients that are dissolved in the wet soil. The water allows the nutrients to flow into the roots. So that's why you want to do it. So let's just pretend that I have just transplanted it. Number two rule is I'm going to water it low and slow. So I'm going to go down right around it. This is a transplant, let's pretend, and you go like that, and you establish that lovely plant in its new home. That's how much water you want to give it when you first transplant it. Notice that I have not stood up high and poured from here, because you know what would happen if I did that? It creates this massive force of water, and we all know how that feels when we're standing in the shower, right? And those tiny little plants and that tiny root structure just will get annihilated. So that's rule number two, low and slow. And that goes for any new plant. You want to do that. As they get older and as their root system gets more established, you can be less motherly about it. But for right now, you want to really baby them. So those are rules number one and two. Okay, here's rule number three, that when you are sowing seeds outside and planting them in the ground straight, you want to pre-soak the ground. Okay, so that means you water the soil and then you plant the seeds. It's the same reason behind this rule, is that if you've just gone and taken all these exquisite tiny little seeds and you've planted them all in and then you're watering, you're just kind of disrupting and shifting around all the work you've just finished. So this is just a way easier way to do it. So if you come down here on the soil, so let's say I've prepped my soil bed, it's all ready, my top 4 inches or so are really nicely cultivated. Then I'm just going to pre-water. I'm doing it here with my mother's coffee pot from the 70s, but you could do it with a spray hose, for example. And you let that all soak. You're going to really want to get it nicely soaked, actually. And let that all soak in the ground. And then once you've done that, then you can make your little areas. And then you can, let's pretend we're just going to plant our seeds. And then you're going to cover them over, and then you're going to firm it down, and now you've got moist soil and your seeds are not going to get splashed around anywhere. That's rule number three. Here's rule number four, which is the time of day that you want to be watering. Generally speaking, you want to water in the earlier morning or in the later afternoon, early evening. The reason you don't really want to be watering in the heat of the day is that it's hot, and so there's a lot of evaporation that's happening at that time of day, and what you'll find is that you're just going to be very inefficient with your watering. You're going to lose a lot of water to the evaporation. So if you water in the early morning, you've got the plants getting all moist and happy for the day. They're going to do a lot of lovely growing, and they're going to use that water really efficiently. If you do water in the evening, it's also a good time to do it, but I have heard that, the ill effects of that are that, for example, this little baby cucumber plant it's prone to, it doesn't like mildew, and it doesn't like being damp. And so if I'm watering in the evening, and let's say I'm accidentally getting their leaves wet, well, now the sun's about to go down, the leaves are going to stay moist, and then it's just going to be a little bit sort of damp and chilly soil, and it just feels to me like it's not the best plant. So if you can do your watering in the early morning, before the heat of the day, that's your top time. Okay, here's the next rule, and it is this. It is better to do deeper, less frequent waterings than it is to do frequent, shallow waterings. Okay, so you want to go deep every few days, and generally speaking, that's what most plants love. And the reason behind this is that, so take this tomato plant for example. This tomato plant actually can achieve a root structure of about this size underneath the soil. That's how deep they want to send their roots down. But they are searching for nutrients and they're searching for moisture. And if you're only ever watering at the very surface, just like trickle, 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 they're going to go looking for the water. So they're going to establish these very shallow root systems that are going out. And then when the heat of summer comes along, that top layer of soil starts to really dry out. And all of a sudden you have a stressed out plant. Whereas if you've been training it to go deeper and deeper, then when the heat of summer comes along, they are going to be down where it is moist. So what does the deep watering look like? You put the hose on it or whatever, and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's what I do. So you can use a hose that's not on like full blast, or you can use a hose wand, or you can do what I do, which is walking around with my coffee pot, and I have a wheelbarrow. You can show them that. I have a wheelbarrow, and in it I have a tote, and I filled it up with hose water. And if I've been very clever and good and smart, I've actually let that sit overnight to let the chlorine evaporate off of it. But if you don't get around to that, that's okay. But this is just a really nice, soothing way to go around the garden in water. And that's that rule. Okay, so the next rule is this. Some plants like overhead watering, meaning they like to get their leaves wet. Other plants do not like overhead watering, and they must be watered by drip or right down close to the ground. So basic categories of the plants that like overhead watering are your leafy greens. Just imagine, this is arugula, they love it, they all want to get wet, they're like, oh, bring on the shower. Over here we've got carrots, carrots love it. Over here we've got beets, they like to get wet. And over here we've got romaine lettuce, they also like it too. So leafy greens, basil's included here. They all love sort of an overhead water, so they don't mind the wand hose, they don't mind being sprayed, all that kind of stuff. I like to buy it for $1. I bought it at the thrift store, one of those things that you plug into your hose, and those are miraculous. And if you plant all of your overhead watering plants in one place, suddenly you've got a very, very easy watering job on your hands. So the other group of plants that do not like overhead watering are the plants that are prone to powdery mildew and mildew, fungusy related plant diseases. And so that includes your tomatoes. Do not get tomato leaves wet. They do not like it. Same with cucumbers, same with squashes, same with melons, watermelon, cantaloupe, all those guys. They like to be having drip irrigation, so you can buy a soaker hose and you can put it right next to the plant, soak, 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 or you just hand water them every few days like I showed you. The thing about it is melon plants, they need a lot of water, and so if you can afford a soaker hose and do it that way, you will thank yourself for it. Okay, I think this is my last David Letterman top 10 list for watering, and it's actually about manure tea, but manure tea is so good that I just couldn't help resist doing my plug for manure tea. So I've been using manure tea quite a lot this year, and I have absolutely noticed how unbelievably well the plants respond to a good, lovely shot of manure tea. So it is dead easy to make, and I recommend that you do it. You can't overdo it, to be perfectly honest. So you could do it every week, you could do it every second week, you could do it just once, and it would help your plants. So the idea behind it is that manure is, it's basically vegetable matter that has passed through the bowels of an animal. So when it comes out on the other end, it's chock block full of all that beautiful bacteria that is in the gut of whatever animal that you've gotten the manure from, whether it be, chicken or sheep or whatever. In this case, it is sheep. So you don't want it to be sterile. You want to have it riddled with good bacteria. And essentially what you are then doing is making one big tea slurry and providing a space for that bacteria to, you know, multiply and get all the goodness of the manure to dissolve into tea. Now I'm using water that has been sitting outside for at least a day so that the chlorine has gone off of it, because I don't want the chlorine to be killing any of that lovely bacteria. That's really what I'm after. So I'm putting that in there. Rainwater also works. And then I'm going to leave that, and whenever I walk by it, when I think of it, I'm going to agitate it because I want to introduce oxygen into this slurry that we got going on here. I don't want this to be anaerobic, I want this to be an aerobic compost tea. And if you want to, you can also add some molasses. If you've got comfrey in the garden, this is your time to take comfrey leaves and rip them up and add them in. If you Google manure tea, you will find a gazillion different things that you can put into your beautiful tea blend, and your plants will love you for all of it, and you can totally geek out on this as much as you want, or witch out, or whatever you want to say. But this works just as well. So you just let that sit, and you don't let that sit forever and ever and ever. You let it sit for like maybe 24-hour period, maybe 2 days at the most. You don't want it, you know, you want to keep this oxygenated, right? So you don't want it just sitting there. If it starts to really stink, it's not so good. And then, let's say tomorrow when I'm doing my watering, I'm going to then take this and I'm going to actually dilute it further. Now you can't really burn your plants with manure tea, but you can stretch it a ways further. So you could dilute this sort of like, I don't know, add another 5 parts of water to this situation. So let's say fill this a third of the way up, for example, with manure tea, and then top it up with other water. And then that's what you would feed to your plants. I'm going to stop talking because the helicopter's going by. And what it does is it just inoculates the soil with all this good bacteria, and it has all sorts of readily bioavailable nutrients for the plants. And you will be so impressed by what you see your plants doing. They will thank you for it by growing extra green and extra beautiful for you. And that's the tip on manure tea.